To put it mildly, Seiko has one of the most expansive collections in modern watchmaking, and is one of the most important brands among collectors, covering virtually every category in a variety of price points with watches that present some of the best value in the entire industry. With that in mind, what I wanted to do with this video is to create 5 very different types of complete watch collections with a single brand, Seiko. The types of collections will be built around specific themes, so some of them are going to be more serious than others, but the goal here is to have some fun and show a bunch of cool watches around different personas. But let's kick us off with our first persona, and for some people you might be arguing, is this really a way that somebody collects? But I would argue with Seiko, you will see this happen. I actually know a few collectors that are like this. We're gonna call this the ISO 6425 diver collector. This persona values diving capabilities and specifications above all else, looking for a wide range of different Seiko divers for their theoretical or actual undersea adventures. So underneath this broader persona, we have a few different categories. First is gonna be the modern legend. So this is just that dive watch that's just that staple within Seiko's collection and might align with this individual. Here we have the Seiko Turtle. This is the SRPE 93. Very conventional, straightforward turtle design, 45 millimeter diameter, 13.3 millimeters in thickness. But don't get too scared about that 45 millimeter diameter. This watch wears actually amazing, even on my wrist. 46.9 millimeter lug to lug. The Turtle is the biggest enigma of a case that you're going to find in the industry, but then you put it on your wrist for the first time, you're like, okay, this works way better than I would have ever anticipated. Automatic 4R movement on the inside. I would say this is almost a successor now to the SKX. It takes that DNA from the 6309 from years prior. Now you have this updated 4R caliber on the inside, which is a good step up from the 7S26 that we saw for many years within the Seiko 5 collection, as well as within some of the professional dive watches from Seiko. This is that cornerstone of dive watches from Seiko, at least this collection is. You do have different varieties to go for here, but this is going to be the most straightforward and to the point example. For the next watch in this collection, we have more of a technical dive watch. This is the Arnie Land SNJ 033. So we're familiar with probably the Arnie if you are a Seiko collector or even familiar with the brand, being worn by Arnold Schwarzenegger and Predator back in the 1980s. This builds off of that familiar format with a steel shroud in this instance. Lug to lug of 50.9 millimeters, so this wears a little bit larger than that of the conventional Arnie, and also with the stainless steel is going to be heavier as a byproduct. Water resistance of 200 meters. This is an ISO compliant dive watch as well. Analog digital display, solar quartz Seiko movement. I love this time setting on this watch, how you're able to use that digital display for additional functionality and how it fuses with the analog. It's a really good combination. And speaking of combinations, Arnie Land, where does that come from? This is not a Seiko name by any means. This is a collector nickname given with a combination of the Arnie nickname and the Citizen Aqualand, 2 dive watches that have been go-to for divers across the industry. And part of the reason why this watch makes a ton of sense here and why divers love it is going to be because beyond the lore there is true utility and function. Diving log, depth meter, sudden descent alarm. You also have water temperature gauge, and you're getting a metal bracelet option as well. So building off of that original Arnie concept. Now we move along to the Heritage Dive Watch. This is one of my personal favorites. This is the SPB 151. So you have many different models you can look underneath this reinterpretation. This is the 1970 reinterpretation, commonly known as the Willard. This calls back to the 6105, released in, you guessed it, 1970, a model that was famously worn by Martin Sheen in the acclaimed film Apocalypse Now. Funny how both of the last watches have a connection to film in some way. Very similar effect that you'll find from some of the modern turtles. You'll see here 42.7 millimeter diameter, but this wears much smaller than that. I would say this wears like a 40 millimeter on wrist thanks to that lug to lug. It is going to wear broader across the wrist because of this cushion style case, but again, this is a try it before you decide whether it's going to work for you or not. In addition, with this higher price point, you are getting access to the higher grade movement here for the 6R35, basically extending out that power reserve to 70 hours as opposed to the basic 4Rs just cracking 40. And for our final watch in this first collection, we have a dive watch with a GMT in case you are maybe swimming across time zones. I don't know what you do with your free time, but this is the Seiko Prospex GMT, the SFK001. Using that sumo case architecture and then combining a solar quartz GMT movement, which creates a package for in this way under sub $1,000 range, something that I think can have some play for certain type of collectors, especially this type of persona. You do have a larger case, given that it is a Sumo, 45 millimeters. Lug to lug is 51.8 millimeters. So this is going to wear like a 42, 43 millimeter watch on wrist, I would say. Water resistance of 200 meters, ISO compliant dive watch. Movement is a quartz Seiko. This is the 5K65. A couple things I'll mention about this movement. You are getting solar power for that with quartz oscillation. So kind of best of both worlds here. In addition, isolated hour hand function for the local time rather than the 24-hour hand, which for some, that is a nice touch when you're traveling. There's not many GMTs that you are going to find under $1,000. Actually, I'm thinking about it now, very few under $1,000 are going to have that function. Lume is very good, a couple different dial colors to choose from. The Sumo case is not going to be for everybody, but if you are somebody that gravitates towards maybe a little bit of a larger case from Seiko, want more of a imposing case architecture as well, rather than that traditional rounded off case sides, this is going to be right up your alley. So now for our next category, we have the 3-watch collection. This one is, as you would probably suspect, this is a persona that wants to check off as many boxes as possible, looking at the dress category, the everyday piece, as well as some type of complication. So for our complication here, and if we're trying to keep it more on a budget, I would probably say going for a Seiko speed timer is a great middle ground. And looking under $1,000 for a chronograph, these are probably the safest choices that you can make if you are going for quartz or mechanical. I think under $1,000, quartz makes a ton of sense for a chronograph. You get upside of accuracy, and then you don't have to worry as much about down the road about servicing. That's sometimes a doom and gloom scenario that people probably paint too dark of an image for, but in the case of this, it does really sell this watch even further. But the speed timers now have extended to be a variety of different cases as well as dial colors. The models we're going to be looking at here are going to be the SSC 927, the 29, and the 33. So these are going to be these colorful approaches to the speed timer family. Many people remember the SSC 813 models. Those were the original speed timers relaunched a couple of years ago. One thing that was caught up in that, if you look at the diameter of those watches at 39 millimeters compared to these at 41.5, you think that these are going to wear enormously big in comparison, but that is not the case. The lug to lug here is actually very similar, if not on the nose, to what we saw with the previous SSC original case models from a couple of years ago. Lug to lug here, 45.6 millimeters, 13.2 millimeter thickness, and water resistance of 100 meters. But I would say the reason these watches do separate is going to be the movement on the inside. You have a quartz Seiko V192. You're getting the sweep of that second hand on that chronograph while also getting the accuracy of a quartz movement on the inside while fusing the power supply of solar. Seiko also have done a really nice job in hiding where the solar cell and getting light will be accessed within the dial, within those subdials. It's not distracting at all, and it was a very clean way to integrate this. These are some of the safest chronographs to buy under $1,000, and one that I would quickly recommend if you are trying to round out this collection and have this amount of budget. So now we have the dress category, and I try to be different where I can, but I also want to be true to what probably would take place if somebody was going to go with this persona and thinking about collecting with this philosophy. And for that, you have to include a cocktail time here. I mean, cocktail times, you could look at any different model. I have one here. This is the SRPB 41, but so many different models to choose from. 40.5 millimeter case, 11.8 millimeters in thickness, lug to lug of 47.5 millimeters. You do have now some different case options, but this is going to be the standard bread and butter for the cocktail time for sizing. 4R35 movement on the inside. But the star of the show here is going to be some of those finishing details on a watch of this price point. But for a watch under $500, the texture of this dial, the indices, the hands, it all just comes together so seamlessly. Hacking and hand winding for the movement. The star of the show for these watches is going to be that crinkled look to the dial, has a sunray type of look to combine with it. It's a beautiful watch for the money. And then to round it out, we have sports utility. So you could mention an Arnie here, but we looked at something similar previously in this list. So I want to go in a different direction. Here we have the Seiko Prospex SNE 585 and 583. These are not going to be the first dive watches maybe one considers when thinking about Seiko because they're priced around the same range that you'll find some of the mechanical watches from them. However, where I like these and how they can separate is the case size. You're looking at 38.5 millimeters. So if you're somebody that wants a watch that is going to fit a smaller wrist, this is probably going to be right up your alley. Also with the lug to lug being a bit longer, the lug to lug on these is almost equal to that of a Seiko Turtle. It's crazy how different this wearing experience can be just on a few little details about the case design. 11.2 millimeters in thickness is going to make it one of the thinnest Seiko dive watches. It's also going to be ISO 6425 compliant, 200 meters of water resistance. Quartz Seiko V147 on the inside, sapphire crystal, solar powered movement to go along with it. Easily one of the best options for smaller wrists from Seiko dive watches. So if you're a crazy one and this isn't enough Seiko for you, if you're that mad for Seiko, check out the link in the description to our curated collection of Seiko watches on teddybaldassarre.com. We have one of the largest online selections of Seiko watches in the world. I've actually hand curated each one of the watches that appears on the collection. This is a collection I'm very passionate about. I'm always trying to update it, try to keep up with the crazy schedule that is new Seiko product releases, different styles, prospects, Presage, Seiko 5, and a lot more. I do say curated, but we still have dozens and dozens of different Seiko models. Again, demonstrating how this brand has so much to offer and the variety that you have before you when you're trying to make a decision. So if you wanna check that out, link will be in the description down below. So now we move along to our next collection and persona. This is the Explorers Club. So many people, when they think of Seiko, think of dive watches. But if you look back to the original beginnings of Seiko, you think of the Seiko Laurel, which has more connection to the field watch genre of watchmaking. So we're going to be looking at a few different takes on Seiko's Explorer designs. For the first watch within this collection, we have Old Reliable. That's how I'm going to justify this watch within here, and I don't think we're going to get much pushback. This is the Seiko Prospex Alpinist SPB 121. This is the successor to the SARB 017 from years ago. I have always liked the Alpinist, but it's always been a question for me, like, why does this watch work? Because you say these things out loud about its design, like Cyclops now. You have compass bezel, 2 crowns. It's very weird. It's a weird watch in many ways. Green dial, cathedral hands that are golden. This is all over the place. But when you see it in person, it just clicks. And that's sometimes the beauty of watchmaking and watch design. It, on paper, doesn't make any sense, but you combine all the elements together and it works beautifully. That's this watch. 39.5 millimeters with its case size, thickness of 13 millimeters, lug to lug of 46. Real reason why this watch is now separated. 200 meters of water resistance is just remarkable for a field watch design, class leading. Automatic Seiko 6R35 with a 70-hour power reserve. This is also one of the entry points to getting into the 6R35 movements from Seiko. So if you're trying to spend the least amount of money, get that Seiko movement. This is going to also be one of the picks to go for. So this next category is a spin-off, and I'm going to classify this as the explorer that never sees the field. Maybe they're doing a lot of logistics with the maps back at the tent, but not truly doing much exploring, and that's where you mentioned the SPB 155. Would it be capable in the field? 100%, but it's more of an everyday style design that takes the Alpinist DNA, but allows it to have potentially more dress capability. 38 millimeter case, so it is going to wear smaller than that of the SPB 121. Thickness is going to be in line with that as well, lug to lug of 46 millimeters. This does wear smaller as well without the crown and the compass bezel. It's going to appear just more dressy. 200 meters water resistance, though, shows that it doesn't deviate too far from the original premise of this design. 6R35 movement on the inside, once again, falling in a very similar price range to that of the SPB 121. From my understanding as well, it seems like Seiko is trimming down this collection. The 155 still remains, but I'm a big fan of these. The gradient texture of the dial, it's striking. You also have almost this kind of fine grain texture as well as you see it up close. Cathedral handset still works with the design. Lume is simply fantastic, and just because I put it in this subcategory doesn't mean that it is not more than capable. Then for our final field watch, we have the International Voyager. This is somebody that's traveling once again. This is probably more believable than swimming across time zones. Here we have the Seiko Alpinist GMT. This is the SPB 377 and 379. So these were new releases at the tail end of last year. I find the Alpinist design just easily incorporated a GMT. You can't say that about every single watch out there. Sometimes it seems a bit forced. This one was seamless in its transition to allow this functionality. So this movement is the 6R54. We've seen this in other Luxe models, such as the diver models as the SPB 381. This is going to be more of that field watch approach, of course, 39.5 millimeter diameter, thickness of 13.6 millimeters, and a lug to lug of 46.3 millimeters. So despite having a GMT movement on the inside, these are going to wear comparably to what you would find with an Alpinist SPB 121. Going to wear a little bit larger, but not by much. Now for our next category or collector, we have the Seiko 5 Fanatic. And I am somebody that likes to have a variety of different Seiko 5s. They're easy wears on days where you're just questioning, hey, what should I wear? And you just look at a Seiko 5 and you're like, all right, that's gonna work in more situations than it's not. And there's so many different watches to choose from. So the first one is gonna be our dive style. And for that, we have the Seiko 5 Sports, is the SRPD 5.1. All of these SRPDs were really the beginning of that recreation of what the Seiko 5 collection would be now in the 21st century, at least going forward for this next decade especially, because when these were released, it was almost overwhelming. I remember that there was some mixed response about how do we feel about these? I kind of miss the old Seiko 5s, maybe the new logo I'm not as much of a fan of, but these watches have grown on a lot of people, and I think rightfully so. Once we were able to disassociate the past for what these watches truly present now, I think for what you're going for a great watch under $200-300 in that range, it's just no nonsense, and it gets the job done and still is fun to wear. 42.5 millimeters, so taking that SKX style case and fusing it with the Seiko 5 design, 13.4 millimeters for that thickness and a lug to lug of 46 millimeters. These wear like a 40 on wrist, maybe slightly more, but very wearable for mass market appeal. 100 meters of water resistance, more than enough for most people on the planet, let's be real. 4R36 on the inside, mineral glass with that hard Lex. And given the discontinuation of the SKX, you have probably the Turtles to go for or something like this. But if you're looking for the wearability, maybe not the feature set, this is going to be probably the watch that's going to feel the most familiar on your wrist if you're a lover of the SKX. Next, we have Field/GMT. There's a lot of Field watches within the Seiko 5 collection, but there's also a lot of GMTs. So let's get some new blood in here though. We have the Seiko 5 Sports Field GMTs. This is the SSK 023 and 025. So these watches, when I saw these, I'm like, okay, these are going to work. I love the way that these were designed. And again, very similar to when I was mentioning the Alpinist design, fusing with a GMT. The Field watch here just always looks great with a GMT design incorporated within it. This is like Seiko's affordable take on the Explorer 2 design, and it looks phenomenal. 39.4 millimeters for that diameter with a 47.9 millimeter lug to lug. Has a different case structure that you'll find from some of the other Seiko 5 models, but wears great, mass appealing. I'd say wears like a 40 millimeter on wrist. Thickness is 13.6 millimeters. I'd say it wears pretty true to size to that 39.5 millimeter with that lug to lug dimension. 100 meters of water resistance, so you're still getting it there. And then the automatic 4R34 movement on the inside. We saw the teasing of these late last year in 2023, but they just started to become available in the earlier part of this year. These have been very hard to keep in stock. I think people are recognizing that these are tremendous value. One thing that was very interesting for me when I saw these being released is the price of these came below that of the bicolor GMTs from Seiko. Yes, it is a fixed bezel here compared to a rotating bezel, but nice to see that Seiko is not just always seeing like each watch as being a step up in price. We don't always have to go that direction, and I like the fact that these are going to come in cheaper, at least at retail, for those former bicolor SSK 001, 003, 005. Then we have the everyday casual. This one was pretty easy for me. We have the Seiko 5 Sports, is the SRPE 5.1. This is a dress KX, as it is informally known as, but informal in terms of naming, but a little bit more formal for the Seiko 5 collection. I think these have really carved out a lane as being, say, that first watch, everyday style watch that can still be dressed up, but also be casual. This is where this watch excels. 40 millimeter diameter, wears smaller than that though. 44.6 millimeter lug to lug and 11.5 millimeter thickness. This is going to be probably one of the best suited watches from the Seiko 5 collection for smaller wrists. I would say this wears like a traditional 38 millimeter. 100 meters of water resistance, so still getting that upside. 4R36 movement, hacking and hand winding. Hardlex crystal on the front. If the SSK 023 and 025 were the take on an affordable Explorer 2, these are probably the Explorer, or more likely an Oyster Perpetual type of equivalent for Seiko. And an important aspect of the Seiko 5 collection is just the variety of limited editions that pop up here and there. Here we have a pretty colorful one. This is going to be the SRPK13, and this will be our last subcategory underneath this collection. This is a newer limited edition and kind of combining a familiar case, 42.5 millimeters, about 13.5 millimeters in thickness, and a lug to lug of 46 millimeters, metrics that we are familiar with from the Seiko 5 collection. 100 meters of water resistance, 4R36 movement on the inside. Same case format as that SRPD 5.1 and other SKX based models. Where this watch takes inspiration directly is a popular model. It was the 6119 6050 of the late 1960s. This watch is very eye-catching collection with that array of colors on that bezel and chapter ring. And then for our final collection here, we have the Luxe Lover. So in recent years, Seiko has been doing some great things at the higher price points with the Luxe collection across a wide range of different styles and categories. So we're going to look at some of the watches that you could collect there if you're looking at kind of more the higher end side of Seiko. First, we have the travel and GMT. This is going to be the Seiko Prospex GMT. This is the SPB 381. So take the movement we saw earlier from the Alpinist GMT, put it into a design that is going to be of the familiar diver DNA, and then you have the SPB 381. There are a few different options to choose from within this collection. This was released last year. 42 millimeters for that diameter, thickness of 12.9 millimeters, and 48.6 millimeters for that lug to lug. This wears like a 40, maybe 40 and a half on wrist, so it is going to wear smaller than that proposed diameter. Water resistance of 200 meters, so this is still a professional oriented style dive watch with GMT function, 6R54 on the inside. It's a 1968 reinterpretation with that new GMT caliber from Seiko, offering 72 hours of reserve. One other point that I'll mention for this, as well as those Alpinist GMTs, independently adjustable 24-hour hand rather than the local hour hand. Well finished across the board for Seiko, ceramic insert, textured dial on this green variant, gold GMT hand, and a slimmer bracelet compared to other Seiko models. Now we have a dress watch. So dress watches, as you start to get up into this range, are going to have more of this romantic classic look, sometimes Roman numerals. This is one that separates because it's just over $1,000, but you are getting an enameled dial. And I am not familiar with another watch that has an enameled dial in this price range. This is the Seiko Presage SPB 113. So this is a design taking from a famous industrial designer from Japan, Riki Watanabe. And in the 1970s, he was designer of this steel clock, and they basically took that design and infused it within this watch. Enamel dials, I'll just really dwell on this point a bit more because this is remarkable to find at this price point. How you can execute enamel can be done in a variety of different ways, and regardless of how it is done, this is still just incredible to see at this price range. Typically, what you're going to find if you see it from a Swiss watch brand, thousands and thousands of dollars, if not tens of thousands of dollars, typically associated with enamel. It's not an art seen for more industrialized products. Case size of 39.9 millimeters, thickness of 12.4 millimeters, and a lug to lug of 47.2 millimeters, so wearing pretty true to size. Water resistance of 100 meters despite its more dressy undertones, and a movement on the inside with the 6R35. And for this next watch, we have old reliable, the SPB 143. When this watch was released, it was talked about a lot. And a big reason for that was one, the case size, as well as it looking back to the purest design, I would argue, in maybe Seiko's dive watch history. So 40.5 millimeter diameter, thickness of 13.2 millimeters, and a lug to lug of 47.6 millimeters. This wears like a dream on my wrist personally. I'm not going to say that whatever works for me works for everybody, but I do think there are a lot of people out there that will resonate and connect with a watch with these case dimensions. Water resistance of 200 meters, still an ISO compliant dive watch, automatic Seiko 6R35 on the inside. You're just getting over $1,000, so paying a bit more of a premium for this, but this watch to me is worth every single penny. I think it's still one of the best dive watches you can find for this price range. Seiko will classify this as a 1965 reinterpretation. It was released in 2020 and calls back to Seiko's 62 Mas of 1965. The brand's and Japan's first official dive watch. It has that skin diver format. Love the way it looks. Still can be dressed up to a great degree given the very understated color option that you're seeing here. Bracelet is also pretty good, and a nice step up from the entry-level Seiko divers. Is it going to be class leading compared to the broader industry? No, but it does certainly do the job. This watch also looks phenomenal on a different variety of straps, and quite possibly is the best Seiko for non-Seiko people above $1,000. And then for our final watch here, we have a chronograph from Seiko. This is the Seiko Prospex SRQ-047. So this is an intriguing new Prospex chronograph from 2023. It's larger at 42 millimeters wide, but a lug to lug of 49.5 millimeters long makes it where I'd say pretty true to size, if not slightly smaller. Panda dial format, which for many is going to be a coveted design approach. The reference that is based off is a 1972 reference, the 6138-8020. Rare automatic chronograph, column wheel, vertical clutch, 4 Hertz also. So If you're looking at the grand scheme of chronographs in this price range, this is where if you're looking at Switzerland, typically you're getting an off-the-shelf Valjoux for this price and money. So this is probably one of the more attainable mechanical chronographs that you're going to find. And Seiko's history of producing chronographs is probably not discussed enough amongst people that are not as familiar with the brand. Also comes with a 45-hour power reserve and 100 meters of water resistance. But all right, guys, that's my video here today looking at how you can complete a watch collection using one brand, 5 different ways with Seiko. So if you enjoyed the video, you like this style of content, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, hit the bell icon, really do appreciate it. Also, if you were going to build a collection with Seiko, how would you build it? What watches would you buy? And what would be your general philosophy in building that collection? Leave a comment down below. Also check out teddybaldassarre.com, full authorized dealer of over 30 brands, quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, and a full factory warranty for all the products that we offer. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.